Merci, Madame la Présidente. À l'OTAN, nous sommes très attentifs au temps, donc c'est toujours l'intérêt que nous sommes concis, et je suis très intéressé d'avoir aussi vos questions et les réponses. C'était très important. Madam Chair, you're right. Today we are hosting in NATO the defense ministers of NATO. We'll have a session in the format of defense ministers with Ukraine in the NATO-Ukraine Council. I have to say from the start that this council, which was approved by our leaders in Vilnius, works very well. And this is something we'll continue to be doing at all levels. I would say that we are working with the Ukrainians as equals, and I believe this is a political format that is very useful for making sure that our unity and our support for Ukraine continues. I agree with Madam Chair that continuing supporting Ukraine is paramount, not only for Ukraine, but I think for peace and security in Europe. And for NATO, this is something that is paramount. You mentioned also the eastern flank. Just a second on this one. So now we have an eastern flank in NATO with Sweden coming soon. There are some last hurdles, but I know that they will be coming with our 32nd ally coming. We have a contiguous eastern flank from the Barents Sea, the North Sea, Baltic Sea, now far more homogeneous in terms of NATO and EU, Black Sea, the subject of our discussion today, and the Mediterranean. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, that this is a huge Russian strategic defeat in itself. The fact that two proud neutral nations like Sweden and Finland are choosing to come and join NATO in itself, it's a massive strategic defeat for Russia's interests and its imperial, never-ending ambitions. So I just want to say that this is in fact a major transformation of our eastern flank, and I hope and I know that together with the European Union we'll be doing more. One of the oldest NATO-EU cooperation fields was military mobility. And now we see, with the new defense plans in NATO, with exercising more, now we have Steadfast Defender, the largest exercise in NATO since 1988. Tens of thousands of troops and armor, arriving from the US and Canada, doing things. So I just want to say, just in this format, that we are very keen in seeing allies like the Netherlands, Germany and Poland looking into a military mobility corridor. I'm also seeing my southeastern allies trying to do the same in the corridor number 8 from Adriatic to the Black Sea, and also from the south to the north, from Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, once corridor number 9, which is now, let's say, less dynamic. But I'm saying that there are lessons learned, and I think there will be need for more NATO-EU cooperation than ever before. Thierry Breton was with us in the Council. I chaired the meeting of the North Atlantic Council, Thierry Breton. The second time he comes to see our Council. Next week we'll have Stefano Sannino and Charles Fries. We are working with the EU quite a bit, and I just wanted to leave this thought with you. We need to do even more. I just want to give you a sense that since 2014, when Russia occupied illegally Crimea and a portion of the Donbass, at the beginning, quite slowly, NATO started to adjust to the new reality. And I want you to keep in mind that the defense plans, the regional plans that we have adopted and now in the process of implementation, what we call executability, will be the most massive transformation of defense. Planning, command and control, logistics, industrial production, and philosophy of deterrence and defense in NATO in generations. So that's massively important. And we have to make sure that as the European Union becomes more self-conscious of the need to be stronger strategically, that we do these things in a way that will keep the transatlantic community homogeneous, and we encourage strongly European allies to do more on defense. And I believe in a way NATO is probably, because we are becoming so, let's say, intense in our demands for allies, In a way, we are helping EU demolish fragmentation of your defense industry. We are bringing back, dusting off the standardization when NATO is the best and is the only place when we have standards to make sure that we are interoperable amongst us. And we are learning lessons from the war in Ukraine because we see that the fragmentation, especially in Europe, is so detrimental to what we do. Speaking of the support for Ukraine, we also have and the 2% of GDP for defense. Secretary General Stoltenberg will be releasing today, I think, publicly the report on how the financial contributions of allies to the commitments that we took. I think we are close to 20. A few years back, there were only 9 allies meeting the 2% threshold. Now we have 20. And I think that every single ally has a plan to reach 2%, which is approved and credible. You heard in recent days many comments about this from politicians from both sides of the Atlantic. I want to say that allies are making an effort, and I think this is something we have to continue to be doing because war is back in Europe and we have to be prepared for any scenario. Now, on the Black Sea, as Madam President has said, number one, we are seeing the Black Sea and the Western Balkans, Adriatic and Black Sea. Of course, they are two, technically speaking, separate regions, but in fact it's one continuum, strategic continuum. That's why I mentioned corridor number 8. That's why I mentioned our interest. Of course, the Black Sea in itself is a very complex sea because of the configuration of the sea and the geography and the balance of power in the region. But I would have to say that what the Ukrainians, with our help, have been doing in the Black Sea is nothing short of remarkable. And I think we made probably a mistake in being over-optimistic about Ukraine's counteroffensive chances a few months back, and now we have to fight against a sort of over-pessimism. Neither, I think, were, identifying the real. Neither Russia nor Ukraine have enough forces and capacity to have a major breakthrough against the other. That's a reality. But in the Black Sea, with our help, with the ingenuity of Ukrainians, with using drones and using long-range missiles and air and missile defense, they were able to restore the maritime export, grain export lane. And now they can defend. We helping them defend the corridor across the Romanian and Bulgarian and then through the Straits exports by sea. The Russian Black Sea fleet is now hiding. The last frigate that was basically torpedoed or attacked by Ukrainians was in a lake behind Crimea, and not even the Sea of Azov is far enough for them. So there is also some progress that I think we have to keep a little bit of less of pessimism and more things over there. Speaking of the Black Sea, there is also a strong European and riparian states like Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and indirectly the rest of the Southeast Europe about the projects that are also with European funding. The undersea cable connecting Georgia to the western part of the Black Sea. That is not only natural gas, it's a big project. President von der Leyen was, I think, in Bucharest announcing this just a few weeks back. There's also electricity, continuous current electricity, project that is coming that way. So in NATO, we are paying a lot of attention to maritime undersea infrastructure security. We are now establishing a specialized unit in MARCOM, our maritime command, that is working with industry, is working with military, with governments, and of course intelligence, making sure that we know when there is something severe happening. And I think, speaking of hybrid warfare from Russia and others, I think the risk for them, for cyber attacks, for cutting, or the temptation to be cutting our fiber optic communications, our oil and gas pipelines, our ports and airports, is something that we have to look into this. So when we say in strategic concept of NATO that the Black Sea and the Western Balkans are both regions of strategic importance to NATO. In fact, we say that this region as a whole is of massive interest to us. And speaking of that, please, the fact that we are talking so much about Ukraine or about Moldova, I'll come back to Moldova, or the Western Balkans, doesn't mean that we are not paying huge attention to the South. It's not the topic of our conversation today, but when we say 360-degree NATO, we mean it. And this is something that with a conflict that is now the most severe conflict since 1973, I think, in the Middle East, as NATO, without being involved directly, we are paying huge attention to the risk of escalation all around us, and this is one of the most critical periods in this part. Now, the Western Balkans. I chaired, or I led, the North Atlantic Council visit to Sarajevo, I think 10 days ago. Of course, we met EU4 Althea, doing a good job. Of course, also there is NATO liaison office in Sarajevo that is also very important. To be honest, we came back with a sense of concern. Not of imminent risk of escalation, but with a sense of a protracted, always inflammable situation. The same thing in Kosovo. I met yesterday the Prime Minister of North Macedonia. They have elections, and they told us, and I can tell you here in the sanctity of this meeting, that what is happening in terms of disinformation, hybrid, and massive attempts to influence the elections in one ally, North Macedonia, are of great concern to us. And we see regional players playing. Also, we see Russia and other players playing. And I think, speaking of fighting disinformation, the impeccable relationship between NATO, EU, and the G7 communication group is something that we do, and I want you to know that this is working well. And speaking of Moldova, President Maia Sandu, she also has elections. Not only you have elections, not only us have elections in many countries, but there's a very important, or Macedonia, North Macedonia, but there is also an election in Moldova for president. And we anticipate that there will be a massive interest from Russia to basically undermine the pro-Western, pro-European government and administration that President Maia Sandu does. And I plan, if everything goes right, to go with Commissioner Jourova and myself for the opening of the Center to Fight Disinformation in Chisinau, that I think the EU and NATO and all of us bilaterally are also helping Moldova in that direction. So what we see in the Western Balkans is a level of instability which is not dangerous, but you never know when a flame, when a spark can have combustion and have, again, trouble. And if you look to the policy of Russia in Africa, in other places, in the Middle East, you could anticipate that they will be very interested through their proxies also to create problems for us. Also, as some of these countries are accelerating their European Union track. And I'm closing with this thing because I want to have also a conversation. There is nothing more important for NATO, for us as an organization, and for me personally. I've dedicated all my life to bringing my country into Europe and into NATO. That's, I think, the mission of our generation. But we also have to make sure that the rest of the countries that are willing to join the West, and some of them are starting, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Bosnia, others, the Western Balkans, nothing more important for them to be successful also on the EU track. Nothing more important to have coherence, strategic, political, and economic coherence all over Europe. And that's something I encourage you strongly to support these countries. Of course, it's merit-based. They have to fulfill the criteria. This is not just a sort of a strategic gift coming out of the war, but I think it's a political, strategic, economic, and moral imperative to help the smaller countries that have a geography that is not helping them that much. If they wish so, and if they fight for that, let's give them a chance to be part of the family. And NATO and EU, we are part of the same family, and I think this is something that I think is the obligation of political leaders like yourselves to making sure that Europe, after this bloody war that it's entering its third year in a few days' time, is doing all this. So, merci infiniment, Madame la Présidente, et je suis tout à fait prêt de prendre les questions de vos collègues.